Hi, it's Matt Mahler with MovieWeb. It's a pleasure to speak with both of you today.
Yeah.
Um, I love this. This was is so good. It's one of those shows that just turns a switch on you didn't know existed beforehand and makes you just yeah,
That's what we're
it's
going for. That's awesome to hear.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And I mean, yeah. On many levels it's such a grounded, mature show for, the format. But there's also this great heightened world building, like if John Wick was a mycologist
Ooh, I
and
love
the
that.
whole world was about
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Love
um
that.
so I've heard a lot in interviews about how the idea came about through conversations, but how did you two get together? And how did Mike Judge and Greg Den, how did that partnership sort of happen? Whoever would like to speak to it.
Well, Mike Judge and Greg Daniels they'd worked together in King of the Hill, and they were starting an animation company. And I'd worked for Greg as a writer on The Office, and they both knew Joe as a cool animator. They'd seen his shorts and stuff. So they sent me a bunch of animators to look at, and Joe's stuff was just like making my head explode. And Joe agreed to meet with me, and we met up, and like immediately we're speaking the same language about medicine, pharmaceuticals, thought experiments about what would happen if somebody had a mushroom that was like the world's best medicine, and why is it that these things affect our brain in these ways, and what does it mean, and talking about interesting kind of weird characters, people like Terrence McKenna and Paul Stamets, and fictional characters too, like John LaRoche in Adaptation, these oddball kind of guys who are following a thread as far as it'll take them, and even if that brings them into conflict with the world, and talking about capitalism and these crazy systems that we live under. And we just got going fast and referencing the same kind of movies, and so we were off and running, and that was like 5 or more years ago. And we've been working on the show ever since, and not bored of it, at least from my point of view. So it was a
Yeah.
good.
Anything to add, Joe?
Well, yeah, I before meeting Steve, I read both of his novels, The Wonder Trail and How I Became a Famous Novelist. And The Wonder Trail is actually about Steve going down to through Central and South America and his kind of like just adventures on that journey. And a big part of that was part of the inspiration with the show. So I was really excited after reading those to meet Steve, and knew he was already a great writer, but that really like clinched the deal. And we were just yeah, to
Yeah,
what
within minutes we were like, here we go.
okay, we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love the idea. It is almost like Jean LaRouche, but in Scanner Darkly, that kind of thing. It's comes at such a appropriate time because there are so many sort of marshals out there right now,
Yeah.
but who aren't as kind and brilliant.
Yeah.
um, it's a weird time. So there's almost like this porous boundary between understandable disgust with the medical industrial complex, people don't trust pharmaceutical companies, but there's also this sort of extreme where they go to denying vaccinations and
Yeah.
medicine itself. I'm curious, like in that climate, did you ever think of the sort of social connections to that? And sort of as an aside, what would Marshall think about RFK Jr. and his being the health secretary?
But
Well, I
question.
think a lot of that stuff, like that just told us that we were hitting on a nerve that a lot of people have been thinking about. I think we started working on this before COVID, which obviously like
Or
accelerated people's thinking about public health and pharmaceuticals. And I think Marshall would have, he'd probably say something about RFK Jr. We're like, okay, respect a lot of his ideas. However, like he would quibble with a lot of the particulars. He's a guy who like isn't going to let a slight inaccuracy go, and he's very principled and he's honest, and he would respect a fellow outsider, but also point out that there's a few things that we need to be talking about. So that'd be a fun. We should stage a little animated debate between them.
And Joe, I'm curious your thoughts.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that like when we started talking about this was kind of like there was a big kind of cultural shift that happened like after we had kind of been working on this. And so even just the idea of like conspiracy theorists was just a totally different thing, I feel like back in 2019 than it is now. And it sort of like kind of felt like a pendulum swing every time where I was worried like people are not gonna want to hear this kind of shit anymore. This is done. And then it kind of goes back and moves in our favor and back and forth. But, ultimately at the heart of it, I think, we've got these kind of big themes that feel like they're kind of coming back around to being feeling very relevant and everything. But also like, we were just like, let's just focus on Marshall as a character and his relationship with Francis and um, all this other stuff is just kind of, sort of the icing, I guess.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
as we were working, there were all these moments where we're like, "Oh God!" Like mushrooms are having a moment, or
Right,
psychedelics,
right.
or and
Exactly.
now that it's coming out, it's like, okay, well, that just kept going. We didn't
Right.
miss it, I don't think so.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that, but um, and then 2 months ago, it's kind of morbid, but I wonder if what was in your mind during the Luigi thing, the assassination of the healthcare CEO. Did you think like, oh wow, like the response to it was strange, with so much, support of the killer versus, what normally happens. Were you thinking like, oh wow, uh, did you connect any dots with that event?
Yeah, they actually there was going to be a press release about the show on the day that that occurred, the assassination occurred, and then they moved it by a week, which then lined up with when they arrested Luigi, I think the guy's name is, and he became kind of like a folk hero, and it was even more in the news then. So people have been making that connection even if we didn't want to. um, but yeah, that was a deeply distressing and upsetting and weird kind of event. But I think that we were picking on something that society has been picking on. We just have been touching a nerve that has been speaking to a lot of people.
But we did not hire Luigi. Just,
No,
you know.
we do not endorse murders.
No, no, Marshall did. Um,
Marshall is
um,
non-violent, as he says many times.
yeah, I love Marshall so much.
Yeah.
And the show is, the dialogue is realistic, the animation is beautiful, but you get into these brief hallucinogenic sequences that are so cool that only animation can do. Where did those ideas come from for the imagery? Did you let Wes McClane run wild, or were there specific ideas about the motifs that were thematic or anything like that?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of everything. Wes definitely had a big hand in it. The Joshua Tree kind of desert terrain was stuff that Steve and I had been talking about a lot. These little motifs and the shapes and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't know. You sit in a dark room for a while and this stuff just comes up. I don't know. But there's a lot of fun kind of research with all that, and we
Some of it
uh,
just coming out of like the pills and powders and colors that you see in the world of pharmaceuticals or them and the names of these drugs are so it's like this whole fantastical world that society collectively is inventing as we go along.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And nothing,
crazier. It's
nothing coming
more
from your own.
hallucinogenic than anything you could come up with.
Yeah, nothing coming from your own trips. You didn't visualize a little baby without genitals crawling.
We both have little babies that might influence.
Yeah, I love those moments. And so correct me if I'm wrong. There are 10 episodes this season.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And I guess it's early days, but I've heard you have ideas for the future. How far in are you? Do you want to keep going for just another season, or do you have a whole Bible?
We don't have a whole Bible, but we have a lot of cool ideas that we would love to explore. We've started some work on a second season, and hopefully we'll keep going for as long as we can explore these characters and they yield rich, interesting stories that are worth telling.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Joe? Or
No, just we've got a pretty good roadmap, and it's it, I think season two could potentially be more exciting than season one. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, we have been careful to not like everything we're setting up, we hope to fulfill and pay off in a satisfying way in time.
if, worst case scenario, there is no season two, do you think this season wraps up in a way that won't leave people upset if there is no season two?
No, if there's no season two, you should storm Adult Swim's headquarters and demand it.
Perfect. And speaking of season two, like I'm sorry about Scavengers Reign and how that was sort of treated, Joe. Would you want to keep shopping that around in the future to see if any outlet, from Crunchyroll to Hulu or wherever would want to produce a second season, or are you sort of that's way on the back burner?
No, well, I appreciate you saying that. No, I'm very, very confident and very hopeful that doors will open, and I mean, I feel like by the day that thing is just gaining more and more of a big following, and at the end of the day, I'm super proud of it, and uh, that I think that means more than anything. So I'm worst case scenario, if it really just doesn't pan out, I won't be devastated. I'm glad we were able to make it, and I'm glad it was able to see the light of day. And it means the world to have so many big fans on it. But yeah, I'm always like, just put my head down, put my blinders on. Doors will open. It always does. So I'm not worried about it.
Wow, that was such a perfect answer, Joe. It was gracious and
Very zen, very
yeah,
zen.
exactly.
Final question here. I'm curious, I guess Trump signed an executive order to unseal, JFK, MLK, RFK files. Do you have any? I mean, people, forever have been into those conspiracies, other conspiracies. Do you have any sort of pet project conspiracies that you love digging into a rabbit hole for? And would you ever want to incorporate it into this show for both of you before I go?
Yeah, we both love talking about that stuff. Probably healthiest if we don't get going too much on that. I'm excited about seeing the files, although somebody just sent me a tweet that was like, yeah, the files. Surely they put the answers in the files. It's just a matter of opening the files.
Yeah, I heard
Been
Jimmy Kimmel
obsessed
say,
with the Kennedy assassination since I was a kid.
yeah,
I think also like something that almost like Steve and I have been more interested in is not so much the actual conspiracies, but like how these institutions have kind of like fumbled it, and like their way of like dealing with like releasing the evidence, and it feels just sort of like
Yeah,
really like sloppy and funny and very,
totally.
our North Star was always, we've always talked about like Coen Brothers, burn after reading, that kind of a thing. But like just that, oh, this is not the kind of person that should be running this program.
Yeah.
This is
Like a true conspiracy theorist believing that there was a mastermind and everything was perfect and they framed this guy. Like, to me that doesn't jive with what I know of human behavior.
exactly
Like, and with the Kennedy assassination, I'm like, yeah, I think probably Oswald just did it, but then immediately the FBI and the CIA were like, oh my god, we have to cover our ass. Like, who knows
right.
if you knew this guy? And they start throwing things around and made it look much worse than it was.
Right, exactly. They're giving them too much credit.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. If someone created a conspiracy theory in this world about Marshall, it would probably be like in point A to point B. But you're going into all these details and all these screw ups of all these
Yeah,
different people
exactly.
where, yeah, that's what actually happens.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you both for discussing it. I really love the show. I can't wait for people to see it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I hope glad we spoke to you.